Welcome to your Top Think Tanks review. I am your host, Bryce Dolan. Today we're going to cover 4 of the top 50 United States think tanks, and we're going to cover 5 different topics. To begin, we're going to go to the Brookings Institution, where they shed some insight on the harsh reality of creating a diverse teacher workforce. Then we're going to go over to the Economic Policy Institute, stay on the topic of education, where we talk about the teacher pay gap. And then going back to the Brookings Institution, we will see how Russia will not exactly reset in these modern times. Then we'll move on to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, where they have some interesting facts for presidential candidate Donald Trump. Now, staying on the political train, we'll end the show by visiting the Pew Research Center and see exactly how confident voters are when they cast their ballot this November. Now, to begin, public schools are suffering from a diversity problem. The Brookings Institution states that minority students make up near half of the population of public school students. Now, on the other hand, minority teachers comprise 18% of the teacher workforce. They describe this as the one issue in education that everyone supports. But how can this be achieved? How long will it take to make these statistics equal? Well, the authors from the Brookings Institution use 4 moments along the timeline of a teacher to help determine the answers to the previous question. Now, first, college attendance and completion, majoring in education or pursuing another teacher preparation pathway, hiring into a teaching position, and staying in teaching year after year. This is what they found. Interest in a teaching career among minority college students and graduates is lower than whites, by 95% of white graduates majoring in education express an interest in teaching. Now, compare this to the black graduates, which is only 76%. Now, white teachers stay in the classroom at slightly higher rates, 93%, than their minority colleagues, 90% and 92% among black and Hispanic teachers. Though not large, these gaps are statistically significant. Why, do you ask? Well, unfortunately, the authors estimate that these gaps aren't going to get any better. They estimated the gaps to stay essentially the same, if not grow eventually larger. Based on their projections, the diversity gap between black teachers and black students will stay the same through the year 2060, not 2016, 2060. And the gap between Hispanic teachers and Hispanic students will actually increase by 22 percentage points. Now, after recognizing that each stage of the teacher pipeline is leaking minority candidates and teachers, the researchers analyzed the potential impact of addressing each leak individually and collectively on diversity gaps in the future. Well, their findings demonstrate that the path toward reaching a diverse teacher workforce is much steeper than anyone could have imagined or has acknowledged to date. The authors conclude that achieving a diverse teacher workforce must be a long-term policy goal with a suite of long-term strategies put in place to help minorities succeed in college and to encourage them to return to the classroom to help the next generation of students. Our failure to do so will keep us stubbornly in the same vicious cycle in which low teacher diversity contributes in a myriad of ways to low minority student success in K-12 and college, which results once again in low teacher diversity. Now, moving on to the Economic Policy Institute, but staying on the topic of education, they address the current teacher pay gap. Well, the actual decline in there's actually been a decline in current teacher wages. The teacher pay penalty is bigger than ever. In 2015, public school teachers' weekly wages were 17% lower than those of comparable workers, compared with just 1.8% lower than in 1994. This erosion of relative teacher wages has fallen more heavily on experienced teachers rather than on entry-level teachers. Importantly, collective bargaining can help to abate this teacher wage penalty. Some of the increase in the teacher wage penalty may be attributed to a trade-off between wages and benefits. Even so, teachers' compensation was 11.1% lower than that of comparable workers in 2015. Now, an effective teacher is the most important school-based determinant of education outcomes. It is therefore crucial that school districts recruit and retain high-quality teachers. This is particularly difficult at a time when the supply of teachers is constrained by high turnover rates, annual retirements of long-time teachers, and a decline in students going for a teaching career. And when demand for teachers is rising due to rigorous national student performance standards and many locals' mandates to shrink class sizes. In light of these challenges, providing adequate wages and benefits is a crucial tool for attracting and keeping the teachers America's children need. Now we're going to head back to the Brookings Institution. It's time to revisit our old friend Vladimir Putin. Now, the author titled this article, "Why There Will Be No Reset with Russia." Well, to explain, our new president, whoever he or she may be, needs to take a different approach to dealing with Russia. It has been 25 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, and the United States had two main goals following the Cold War. First, integrate the new Russia into Euro-Atlantic and global institutions. Well, the second, if that did not work, was ensuring that Russia did not thwart America's commitment to create a peaceful, rules-based post-Cold War order. Well, with Putin's go-ahead attitude and actions, it is clear that the first one did not work. It is up to the next president of the United States to redouble efforts to achieve this second goal. Unfortunately, new allegations show that Kremlins are attempting to hack the Democratic National Committee and post confidential and sometimes damaging information. Whatever the accuracy of these charges and scope of these disclosures, they seem clearly intended to sow doubts about the legitimacy of our democratic election process. Now, from the Kremlin's point of view, the more uncertainty and questioning, the better. But the Kremlin has skillfully played a weak hand by appealing to patriotism. It blamed the United States for Russia's economic problems and launched an air campaign in Syria last September that forced the United States to negotiate and recognize its enhanced international role. Now, faced with a Kremlin that defines the United States as its main adversary, how should the next U.S. president approach Russia? Well, she or he should not seek another reset, but accept the fact that the Russia we are dealing with today requires a quite different approach. The gap between U.S. and Russian interests in both cases is significant. As long as Russia supports the conflict in eastern Ukraine that has already claimed 10,000 lives, U.S. sanctions should remain in place. The United States should consider enhancing its own military presence in Europe and needs to deter any further attempts by Russia to destabilize its neighboring countries. Now, the Russia challenge is long-term and will likely outlast both the next U.S. president's term and Putin's time in office. So really, only time will tell where this is going to go. Now, we're going to go over to our next article now with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. They touch on one of the opinions of these particular presidential candidates, more in particular, Donald Trump. The two authors write that Trump's suggestion of turning the United States back on South Korea and Japan is just something our country can't really afford right now. Along with Americans feeling uneasy about the upcoming election, America's allies in Asia are getting nervous as well, fearing that America will disengage from the region. Tokyo and Seoul fear that many Americans believe that withdrawal from international alliances and institutions can, to use Trump's formulation, make America great again. Well, isolationism and protectionism took a firm hold on U.S. politics during the primaries. In his foreign policy speeches, Trump declared that America first would be the overriding theme of his administration, and the Asia-Pacific doesn't appear to register in his worldview at all. But a U.S. withdrawal or fundamentally reduced U.S. military presence in Asia would not only undermine regional security, it would also ultimately weaken the United States at home and abroad. Now, while Trump is right to question whether many U.S. allies are essentially free riders, this can't be said of either Japan or South Korea, as the world's third and 11th largest economies, respectively. Japan and South Korea assume a significant portion of the cost of stationing U.S. forces within their borders. Japan pays about $4.5 billion a year in base-related expenses, while South Korea contributes about $870 million, 75% and 40% of the total costs, respectively. Now, for the United States, it's a cheaper way to station troops in these Asian nations than it would be to house them at home. Equally important, these two allies are major markets for United States arms exports. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, from 2014 to 2015, Japan imported $741 million and South Korea $470 million worth of arms from the United States. Now, how do Japan and South Korea make the United States strong? Well, first and foremost, the alliances that demonstrate the importance of shared democratic values and interoperable military capabilities, and also deep economic linkages. Absent partnerships with Japan and South Korea, not to mention Australia as well, the United States would have no real presence across the Asia Pacific. Now, in such an instance, China would quickly move to fill the vacuum and establish its own Sino-centric order. Now, second, both Japan and South Korea have been exemplary partners in the fight against nuclear proliferation. Indeed, while Trump was suggested that Tokyo and Seoul should consider their own nuclear options in the face of a nuclearized North Korea, the best way to counter Pyongyang is through robust alliances with the United States, including an ironclad nuclear umbrella. Enticing as it may seem, a nuclear South Korea and Japan would trigger a regional nuclear arms race, cripple their alliances with the United States, and essentially lead to a much more aggressive China and Russia. Third, Japan and South Korea are both committed to fostering free trade and the rules-based liberal international order that the United States created and benefits from the most. Political candidates from both the Republican and Democratic parties have convinced the public that Trans-Pacific Partnership would hurt the U.S. economy, when in reality, the United States would gain the most from the agreement. The TPP would allow the United States to continue to set the rules of the road on trade, rather than being subjected to a regime designed by another country. Now, staying on the track of politics, we're now going to go more close to home and talk about the potential fraud in this election. Now, the gap between the two camps is about as large among those who express confidence in an accurate vote count nationally. Nearly half of Clinton's supporters, 49%, and just 11% of Trump supporters are highly confident that votes across the country will be counted accurately. Now, according to the Pew Research Center, there are contrasting trends in confidence among supporters of the major political parties' candidates in these election cycles. Now, for supporters of the Republican candidate, confidence has declined over time. Trump backers' confidence in vote count is low. Just 38% are very confident that their vote will be counted accurately. Now, in 2004, among George W. Bush's supporters, nearly twice this share said the same. 75% said that their vote would be counted accurately. Similarly, 65% of John McCain's supporters felt very confident in 2008 that their votes would be accurate. Now, by contrast, among Democratic candidate supporters, the share saying they are very confident their own vote will be counted accurately is significantly higher than in 2008 and 2004. 2/3 of Clinton supporters are very confident that their vote will be accurately counted. Compared with about half of Barack Obama supporters in 2008 and John Kerry supporters in 2004. So needless to say, these statistics have kind of flip-flopped. When back in the day, the Republicans were sure that their votes were going to be counted accurately and the Democrats weren't very sure. And now it's completely flip-flopped, ladies and gentlemen. The Republicans are questioning whether their votes are going to be counted accurately, and the Democrats are pretty sure that their vote will be accurate. But we will see what happens come November. Well, this has been your Think Tank review, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to find any of these articles, all of the links to the articles are located below in the description. Feel free to give us a like on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But until next time, I was your host, Bryce Dolan. Thank you for watching.